Hey everybody, just trying to bring up my YouTube chat. I think I've got it. Testing the chat. Okay, chat's working. Cool. So tonight we're going to talk about, well, I don't really think it's a controversial topic, but I suspect it can become controversial once people start chiming in, which is why I wanted to do this on stream. So hopefully some folks can chime in and agree or disagree, share different perspectives. But I want to talk about why we should stop focusing on our or others' intelligence and why doing so is generally focusing on our intelligence and others' intelligence is generally a bad thing, not a good thing. I know it's a reverse take, which I love to do. Not to be controversial, by the way, but mostly because I think some of the stuff that we've done historically is maybe not super great. I think it could be better. So let's dive into this. But before we do, let's actually take a quick meander at, or gander, whatever the word is, at this paper. And I apologize for the blinding light. Man, that is bright. So if you want to see what I look like in full sun, like, here we go. All right, this paper that Taylor made me aware of today, Your Brain on ChatGPT, Accumulation of Cognitive Debt when Using an AI Assistant for Essay Writing Task. Woo! I feel like there's a missing word or a letter or something. You shouldn't it be when I'm not trying to be critical, but look, this is MIT, right? Okay. Cognitive debt when using an AI assistant for essay writing tasks or an essay writing task, like the word an. I don't know. Okay, so look, I'm probably being too pedantic here, but I love that this is potentially resulting in some cognitive debt. Because I think many of us have kind of known this for some time, that it's like stopping our ability to think critically, or at least I think that it has the potential to do that. And I think this paper, which I've just taken a quick glimpse at, seems to shed some light on this. And it sort of makes sense that if you are relying on some other thing to think for you, then you may start losing that ability. I think this second sentence is, I haven't, again, read this paper, but this might be the cornerstone of the paper, and I like it quite a bit. Like any other tool, it carries its own set of advantages and limitations. Yeah. This is part of the reason why I think I'll mention I'll write code in a text editor, is I don't want to necessarily be beholden to any particular tool. And I don't want to be beholden to only write code when I have a debugger, or only languages that are compiled, right? I'll try to do this in a variety of settings. And I think, hey, T, welcome. We're actually talking about the paper you shared with me today. So we're in full swing. There's a bit of a detour, but since it's related to things that are happening right now, and it's also related to the topic of stopping focusing on your or others' intelligence, it seems like a good thing to lean into. Just coincidentally, I do work with MIT quite a bit, and I don't think I know. There's a couple non-MIT folks on here. What Wellesley College and Massachusetts College of Art and Design, Mass Art. I that's great. Want to call those? I mean, mostly I'm calling them out because it's good to call other folks that are not necessarily just the fancy 3-letter acronym out. We hear a lot about them. On a similar vein, not everything at MIT is all puppy dogs and rainbows. Now, I have a very hard rule that I tend to not say negative things about stuff if I can avoid it. And so I'm going to follow that rule. However, the MIT Media Lab has had there's been some stuff. Now, it's not my objective to throw anyone under the bus, so I'm not even going to mention the things that they're at like the top of my mind. If you want to know more, you're welcome to Google MIT Media Lab and see what you find. I'm just saying that even fancy places like MIT can come under scrutiny, and they can sometimes make mistakes. We all I make mistakes all the time. I actually started recording this that before this live stream, true story. And I made a mistake in that recording. I was going to do this offline, and I was 20 minutes into it, and there was a huge mistake that I made. I had to stop, completely wipe out that recording and do this again. So I make mistakes all the time. I'm not trying to say anybody's perfect. In fact, that's a big part of this whole episode. But I think that it's important for us to realize that even superhero places like MIT can make mistakes. And if anything, I think that should give us confidence that we can do stuff. That if yeah, absolutely. Today I learned. That's very much how I feel about these things. So I'll check this paper out. Maybe we'll do a deep dive on it. I love the fact that this type of thing is coming out. And I wanted to share with you, some of you who aren't, right, I'm 50. I like to say that over and over and over again because, one, it's true. And with my 50 years of life lived, I know some stuff that I know not because I'm smarter than anyone else. I just may have been alive longer than some of you, many of you. In fact, according to the demographics for YouTube, probably 85% of you are younger than me, which is cool. So you may not have been around to know that there used to be this thing, this campaign, especially in the United States, on this is your brain on drugs. Okay? And the campaign was this. It would start out and it would say, this is your brain. And it would show this egg. It's like, this is your brain. This is egg. And then it would say, and this is drugs. And the drugs would be like this frying pan. And then it would be like, this is your brain on drugs. And then, yeah. Yeah, right. So you hold up the egg. This is your brain, the frying pan, that's drugs. And then combine, this is your brain on drugs. Okay. Here's the key takeaway. Your brain on drugs. Hold that in your head. Your brain on ChatGPT. Coincidence? I don't know. That's for you to decide. All I'm saying is I'm just showing you some dots. You decide if they're connected. I know some folks over at that institution, and they can do fun things with wordplay. I guess I'll leave it at that. So along the lines of focusing on intelligence, this felt like a relevant thing to talk about. Okay, so now the actual topic at hand, which is why you should stop focusing on intelligence, both yours and others. Now, I want to be clear. I don't mean like ignore intelligence sort of in a general way, that intelligence doesn't matter. Sure, it does, of course, right? Or maybe I don't mean of course in a snarky way. I mean like, look, a big reason why people argue that the human race is at the top of the food chain is because of our supposed superior intellect over other species. I think that some of that may be true. I think that another part of that is our ability to work collectively. For example, we know that wolves are incredible predators because they can function in packs and they can take down animals that are significantly larger, far more dangerous than they are because they function as a community. And humans do the same thing. And I think it's also not unironic, or sorry, I guess it's not ironic that humans and wolves are now like living together. If you consider that dogs are supposedly 7% or something gray wolf, right? So they're pack animals, we're pack animals, and now you have two different animals that are both oriented on packs and communities, and gee, they work together really well. Like, also, coincidence? I don't think so. I think community-based animals can work very well with other community-based animals. Okay, so you've got that aspect, but you also have this intelligence part. And part of that, hey Ramesh, part of that intelligence part, I think is well documented that humans are at like the top or potentially near the top of the global species on this planet. There's a couple contenders, as I understand it, things like dolphins, an octopus is actually hyper intelligent. They can open doors and things. And there's other species I think that are up there. Obviously, monkeys have certain abilities to reason, and in fact, dogs. It's turned out that dogs have incredible ability to reason about humans in ways that other animals cannot. At least this is what I've been told or I've read. And part of that is their ability to understand what pointing means when humans point at something. So this is a really interesting phenomenon. You can Google this. Supposedly they did these tests where they had various animals that were very intelligent and they used humans to point at something. And most of those animals, if not all those animals, did not understand what pointing meant, but dogs did. So a human would point at something like this thing over here. All the other animals would be like, okay. And the dog would be like, oh, that thing. I'm going to go get that thing. That's actually a really interesting sign of intelligence in my mind. Okay. So look, the higher order bit with this intelligence piece is simply that I know intelligence is important for the human race. I realize this is part of the reason why we have all these fancy gizmos and technology and advances in science. I get all that. What I'm going to try to argue in this episode is that if you focus too much on intelligence, both your intelligence or others' intelligence, you're often doing yourself a massive disservice, both to you and others. And I'm going to try to break this down into the four categories that I think it resides in. That is, you thinking about your own intelligence, you thinking about others' intelligence, other people thinking about your intelligence, and others thinking about other people's intelligence. I'm going to talk about all four of these, and I'm going to try to show that in all cases, it's not helpful. And keep in mind, I haven't like practiced this, rehearsed this in any way. I have no idea what I'm going to say. We're going to find out together. Just like I figured out this brain on drugs thing. And also, before, when I was quickly setting this up, I did a quick, I think maybe when I was focusing on the intelligence piece, I got this Quora answer. And I want to share that Brian White, who is, I guess, a scientist, that's cool, man. I downvoted his thing and I downvoted it because I I don't necessarily agree with this, and I think that the tone of his comment is not super great for community building, and I also think it creates a certain level of pretension on something that I think is actually quite unclear. And he's doing, potentially, whether it's his intention or not, I think that he may be doing the community a disservice by stating things in such a matter-of-fact kind of way. In fact, this is something that I argue for my students and people that work at Merle and others to not do, to use weak claims instead of like what he's saying here. So the question is, why is it difficult to accurately define and or measure intelligence? And then he responds, we can accurately define intelligence as suggested by Arthur Jensen in the G factor. Intelligence is equal to psychometric G. Wasn't hard, was it? So that seems very sort of like disingenuous. First of all, he hasn't defined what psychometric G is. All he's done is write an equation. And so he hasn't actually defined anything, because without a definition of psychometric G, this equation doesn't mean anything. So it isn't a complete definition. It's like calling a function and saying, see, I solved it because I called this function. What does the function do, yo? Until we know that, we don't know if you've solved world peace or if you've solved how to cook your brain. We don't know. Okay, so it was and it still is hard, actually, Brian. And I don't mean that in a snarky way. I mean that in, yeah, it is still hard. So then he talks about how measurement is typically done with an IQ test, and saying that the random error in this is about 5%. Yeah, I seriously doubt this for a variety of reasons, which I can go into. But let me give you a couple just off the top of my head without even thinking about this. The amount of sleep persons had, their ability to focus differently with pressure, without pressure. Those two factors alone will likely have massive differences, deviations in the result of those IQ tests. I can almost guarantee you it's going to be more than 5%, because I can tell you on my own terms that if I'm under an extreme amount of pressure, or back in the day when I used to be really sort of jarred by these things, I would do significantly worse if I felt like people were watching me. That's the first piece. And I know there's many people that are like this, that they do not test well. I wasn't the only person. There's many people that don't test well. And so the actual intelligence that they have is likely to be significantly larger than what the IQ test shows. That's the first piece. The second piece is there is concrete medical evidence that we lose significant cognitive function if we are sleep deprived, if we're sleep impaired. We know this. That's why people will say like sleep impairment, sleep deprivation is equivalent to things like being high on hallucinogenics, like taking acid or LSD. So really, you're trying to argue that someone that's sleep deprived, that is functioning in a way that they would if they were tripping off of acid, is only going to result in a 5% deviation from how they'd perform normally? I don't believe it, brother. Not for a second do I believe that. So already this person has sort of like cooked themselves, right? And I'm literally only at 4 or 5 sentences in, right? So yeah, this person I think is not giving a compelling answer. And then when I dug in a little bit more, first of all, you're citing a paper that's over 25 years old. Okay, show me something recent. Show me something in the 2020s that argues about this with such clarity. And there may be a couple places that you would find, but I can almost I don't want to say I can guarantee, but with some level of certainty, given that I work with many of the leading folks in academia and in industry that are neuroscientists and study these things, that the general view is we don't actually deeply understand intelligence. There's far too many factors. And on top of that, if you think, like, I can already tell you that this is bogus, vocabulary is not an innate quality that people have with their mental acuity. It's a developed skill. When you're born, no one has a vocabulary. That means then, based on this metric for IQ test, that people's IQ will continue to grow as they improve their vocabulary. But it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be that you can take this test whenever you want, and intelligence is a thing that you can define basically that's immutable. Well, I can tell you that the vocabulary I possess today at 50 years old is significantly larger than the vocabulary I possessed when I was 5 years old. So therefore, if this is a measure of intelligence, then I'm way smarter today than I was as a 5-year-old. But I thought it was supposed to be like, or a 25-year-old. I thought it was supposed to be this fixed thing. It's immutable. Like your IQ can't go up or down. That's something that can go up and down. On top of that, I know there are strategies to game this piece, this memory piece, right? You use things like pseudonyms. You have training that helps you memorize things much faster. In addition to that, your ability to reason spatially is something that can be taught. Like you can start to teach people concepts like how to think about the asymptotic computational or the asymptotic temporal or spatial growth of things. And this helps you reason about things in a spatial sense. The spatial sense is the size overhead, the virtual size overhead of these containers. And that helps you understand things like growth. That without that specific training, you wouldn't actually understand. On top of that, as infants that don't understand the physical world, this also relates to spatial reasoning, that we often don't understand things like windows. When we're first born, we don't understand windows. It doesn't make sense to us, but then we learn. That is, I think, an example of spatial awareness and spatial knowledge improving over time. There's some analysis where they'd have a baby walking on this flat surface, and in one part there would be a piece of glass on the ground, and the baby would stop because it would think that they're going to fall through, right? Dogs will also do this. Cows will do this, right? But then human adults won't do this. Why? Because we've learned how to reason about things that we're not born with, but we've gained more spatial reasoning, spatial cognition abilities. So again, if this is the idea that we have this thing that's an immutable quality, right? So like the IQ test, which as I understood it, is supposed to be like this immutable thing. These are not immutable qualities. These are things that can change through training. So anyway, I got a bit fired up when I started seeing this stuff because I realized there's a lot of people that have some strong opinions about these things, and they in many cases they're speaking very loudly, but they're not necessarily speaking in maybe a super reasonable, rational way. And it's my hope to provide a little bit more, at least, of my view on this. And again, I don't know what I'm about to share is correct. I don't have any belief that the things that I think today are going to be the things that I think tomorrow. But I have thought about this one quite a bit. And part of the reason why I've spent a lot of time thinking about this is when I was growing up, I'm trying not to out anyone here. I was in an environment where certain people deeply praised the whole IQ test. And coincidentally, it's somewhat interesting is that a lot of the praise for the IQ tests had to do with the fact that these people thought that they were on the low end of the IQ, not the high end. Like they saw themselves as being inferior, and they wanted to be better, and maybe they did okay, but it's sort of like it was out of reach for them to be like this super genius. And so they placed all this weight on this idea of an IQ test. And as an adult now, it's crazy how, in my mind, hurtful this is to children. That's like the biggest issue that I have. It's not adults. Hopefully adults can think for themselves and realize the things that I'm saying are going to make a whole bunch of sense. But the real concern is the impact that it has on children that don't know yet because their brain actually is not fully formed. Again, science. The science tells us, I don't know for women, but for men, approximately until you're at the age of 25, is your brain like fully formed. That sort of argues then that you haven't reached necessarily your cognitive peak until 25. That's when you should maybe like start thinking, right? Which again goes against a lot of some of the historical stuff that you may have heard, which is, oh, all the great geniuses have figured out their Einstein moment by the age of 25. First of all, this is largely, I think, also disingenuous. Part of the reason why I think this is disingenuous is that back in the day, people would only live to be like 40. And so you didn't have a lot of people coming in and figuring out crazy stuff at the age of 65 because people were not living to be 65. So then, yes, of course, the people that were younger, because like, mortality rate was, the average life expectancy is like 35. So yeah, a lot of people's major accomplishments would be before 35, but things have changed now. And so anyway, there's many other details that we can talk about, but this one in particular caught my attention because I think it's a great example of how we're doing ourselves a disservice by focusing so much on this. And I really liked, so I downvoted this guy because I think that this is a really bad take. Like, no disrespect to Brian White. Maybe you're a super cool guy. That's awesome. But this take on this and the sort of arrogance of this, because it comes off as like just the way you just don't need to have this question. Minimally, just eliminate this question because it's not a question. You're just trying to flex. And on top of that, as another scientist, bro, you haven't actually defined anything. You've defined this, but this is undefined, so it's still undefined. I can't execute this until I have this definition. And then when I look at this definition down here, if this is what this psychometric G is, I can tell you that this doesn't match an intuition of what I understand of intelligence because minimally because of this piece, vocabulary. And the truth is, I've taken a couple of these IQ tests as I was growing up because some of those people that it really mattered to, they wanted to see how I'd perform. And I was sort of brainwashed into thinking, and I'm not the victim here, I'm just trying to walk you through my childhood. I was brainwashed into thinking that this really mattered. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I realized this is a bit bogus. This whole IQ thing is like really kind of sending people, I think, in the wrong direction. And a big part of that is what we're going to talk about. So I did, this is like 30 minutes preamble without even getting to the topic. I wonder how long this stream's going to go. Okay, so I did want to say there was one other comment that I looked at that I really quite liked. Maybe it was this guy. He has twice as many upvotes. I think this is a little bit more, not that upvotes are like the teller of all things, but I think this was more reasonable. He's saying it's difficult to properly define a term when there's no widespread agreement about what it means. Yeah, I think that this is one of the core issues that we have with intelligence. What does it mean exactly? What are we actually trying to measure? And we have all these different types of intelligence. That you have like the IQ intelligence, which is testing things that are spatial reasoning, memory, whatever. Like, what is vocabulary doing in here? Like, I, I, I don't understand how this has any relevance to someone's core intelligence. This is knowledge, isn't it? That it's just knowledge. Like, that's how you build a vocabulary: is you study words, you learn what those words mean, and then you use those words. It's a knowledge thing. And yes, there's some degree of intelligence, obviously, but all the intelligence in the world is not going to manifest a vocabulary. You have to have the words and the knowledge to be able to do that. There is some correlation of your ability to master vocabulary with intelligence, for sure. But the core issue here, at least in my mind, is knowledge. And so what are we testing for again? Are we testing for knowledge, or are we testing for intellect? And if we're testing for intellect, like, why is, like, again, you can probably see I have some issues with some of these things. And I have spent some time on this. I think that this guy's answer was pretty good, but there was another one I saw in here that was, I think, super short. And I have no idea where it is. It was something like, I can make a definition of intelligence really quickly, but if the world doesn't adopt that definition, if they disagree, what have I done? And I think that's a really good point. For example, the majority of us, I believe, think that the world is round at this point. It's mostly agreed on. I think there are some flat earthers out there, but the majority of us are like, well, you know, it kind of makes sense and we can fly around it. I've seen pictures, and if we understand the whole celestial objects, it kind of would need to be round, you know, because this whole flat thing, how is that going to float around in space? And so that's sort of what consensus on a definition looks like, is that we can say the earth is round. And then people can say, yeah, I agree with that. But with intelligence, like, we don't know. Okay, so now let's put a pin on this whole intelligence piece as far as what its definition is. And let's instead suppose that we can understand intelligence as an immutable characteristic. So let's just say that it's something like IQ. And mostly I'm just doing this to sidestep this issue so I can focus on the real issue, which is why we shouldn't really spend much time at all talking about our intelligence or other people's intelligence, because mostly it's a waste of time. That's my strong conviction. So assuming that we have this fixed property, and assuming that intelligence is an immutable characteristic, like height, like eye color, like skin color, all of those things, that means essentially that intelligence can't change. We cannot influence it. And I think in the prior recording, I was making a joke about my height. And I was saying, when I was at my tallest, I think I was measured at 5'11", 5 foot 11 inches. And then more recently, I'm like 5'10", because spine compression, you know, that kind of thing. And then maybe now I'm at 5'9". But here's kind of like the important point about this. Me spending any time at all wishing that I was taller or shorter is probably not going to have any influence on my height. My height is what it is. It is what it is. I have no ability to control this. It's an immutable characteristic. So, in the same way that we think about other immutable characteristics, why is it this one that we somehow put in a lens of we praise people if they have a lot of it? Like, think about this for a second. We know when we see, like, I don't know, maybe objectively beautiful people. Let's just pick your favorite beautiful person, and then imagine that person in your head and say, okay, that person's beautiful. Now, how much of that beauty is a byproduct of things they've done? Now, admittedly, I think that generally speaking, their physical fitness, right? How much muscles they have, their body fat, whatever your preferences, the type of hair they have or no hair, there are certain things that they have had some control over, and then other pieces that they've had no control over, right? So, for example, I can control my weight to some degree, but I can't control my facial structure. My bone structure is like, for example, this is a bone here. I didn't do that. Somebody else did that. That was just genes. And so if you like this, that's great. If you don't like this, that's also great. It doesn't matter really to anybody in the sense that I can't control it. And the same is potentially true with intelligence. So when we look at someone and we say, wow, they're beautiful, most of us know in our heart of hearts, but this is only skin deep. This is not something that you should measure someone's worth on. It's like, yes, they're a beautiful person, but what does that say about them? The same is also true of intelligence. Just because someone possesses or does not possess a huge amount of intelligence per whatever measurement you want, it doesn't tell you anything necessarily about who that person is. Moreover, it certainly is not indicative of what that person will or will not achieve within the certain parameters that we're focusing on. Now, there is a category of people that are on sort of what we'll say like the lower end of this IQ spectrum. I'm just picking IQ because I just don't know of anything better. But whatever the measurement for intelligence is, there are some people that are on this lower end, and those are people that we would consider do not have like the same sort of, they're not sort of in the same range of general intelligence as other human beings. Okay. I don't want to get into the various ways that this happens, but usually there's two types of, at least to my knowledge, there's two general ways for this sort of reduced mental capacity or cognitive ability to happen. The first is they're born a certain way that then has limitations on their potential for sort of average level human intelligence. Hopefully that's sufficient for people to reason about. The second is something happens in their life that then inhibits their ability. There was actually a friend of mine in high school. He got into a terrible motorcycle accident, and his ability to think critically was never the same. So you can have life events that will massively impair your ability to think. In these two categories, with these people that are sort of in this lower end, I'm not considering them. So here's the spectrum of intelligence. The people that are here in this category, we're cutting them out because I'm just talking about people in this range. So for people in that range, let's say it's IQ of 100 to whatever the maximum is for the IQ test. Was it 200 or something? Maybe it's above 200. I don't know. I don't actually care. That's how much I don't care. Now, what I have seen is that people that are on the low end of the spectrum, like the people that were in my childhood that are obsessed with this and want to be better, this can cause massive inferiority complexes in them and inhibit their ability to achieve the great things that they could achieve if they stopped thinking and wasting their time about wanting to change this immutable characteristic. Again, it's like if I woke up every morning and said, if I could just be 6 foot tall, everything would be better in my life. Would it though? What would it change? Would I run around and tell people I'm 6 foot tall now? Like, okay, people would probably think I'm out of my mind and like probably lose almost all respect for me because I'm focusing on something that's so superficial. The same is true for intellect. If you run around and say, oh, did you know I have 190 IQ? I can almost guarantee you are not going to be the life of the party, right? People are not going to totally love that because it's an immutable characteristic. You didn't do it yourself. And on top of that, generally speaking, bragging to like total strangers is like not a super great way to interact with people in a social setting. Also, something that I think is actually related to intelligence, just a different type of intelligence, like social intelligence or emotional intelligence, which I don't know if it's captured here, but I think that that's a real thing, like intelligence related to soft skills. But notice though that those emotional intelligence behaviors, those soft skills, those are in many cases learned. They're learned. They're actually skills. Is you are teaching people how to interact. I've mentored many people along the way, and I've explained, well, here's the reason why you shouldn't generally do this. And people that have really good intentions, but they just sort of don't know proper etiquette, they've been able to have significantly more influence and impact with other people once they understand these sort of core properties on how to behave socially. And we call this emotional intelligence. There's that word, intelligence again, right? Now, this one is different. This one is actually mutable. What I'm talking about here, this intelligence part, this IQ part, this is, as I understand it, for the most part, a belief that it's an immutable property. It's like my height. It's like my hair color. It's like my eye color. I can't change it. I can pretend to change it, but it doesn't really impact anything. Okay. So now we'll go back to the two categories of the people that I want to talk about how this does a disservice to people either on the lower end or the upper end of this intelligence spectrum. Okay, so for the lower end, if people focus too much on this, it can often be in a view of inferiority. I'm inferior because I'm just not as smart. And it's not a good way to view things, I think. That negativity and being down on yourself, like, again, if it's immutable, it's sort of like if I woke up every morning and said, I'm a failure because I'm not 6 foot tall. This is not helping me. So don't do it. It's just a waste of time. Just embrace who you are with your core intellect and your neurons, and then move on. We're going to go more into this as we go more into these categories, but I want to share something about the upper end of the spectrum to shed some light on this that I think a lot of people can be very confused about. They might think that if you're on the upper end of the spectrum, well, you've got it made. You're like the guy that's 6'5" and everybody loves you. Well, much to probably some of your surprise, I know people, in particular, people that might be interested in men, that have rules that they will not date people that are taller than a certain height. Sounds crazy. It's true. And part of the reason is there's too much of a height difference, is that they don't like it. I also know, in a very interesting way, is that I've heard this from many women that I know that are scholars and scientists and professors, because this is sort of my crowd. They've often said to me that men will not date women that are smarter than them. Think about that for a second. So women or other men won't date men that are taller than them. Okay, I thought being tall was super great, right? Oh, maybe not. And then women now are not going to get men because they're too smart. What do they have to do? Pretend to be dumb? Pretend to not be able to solve problems quickly? This is a bit of a bummer. So here's people on the upper end of the spectrum, and it's not all puppy dogs and rainbows. They have to actually pretend in some ways that they don't have this skill or this immutable characteristic so they can find a partner. And I don't know that, I mean, that's a potentially long time to be faking it to find the right person. But there's another angle to this that I think is often overlooked, and that's this angle of if you go through life, especially the early parts of your life, the formidable years, and everything that you're given is easy, you're presented not with challenges that will actually push your boundaries. What does it look like then when you enter your adult life and you finally are now challenged by real problems that push your cognitive limits, but you haven't developed the skills that are necessary to deal with failure? What do you do then? So let me walk you through this just so we can think about this more concretely. I know people that are on the upper end of this whole IQ space that have told me very openly that they struggle significantly once they got to grad school because they finally got to a point to where they couldn't just immediately solve a problem like they could through all the years before grad school. That for the first time in their life, they actually had to deeply think about a problem and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to function because they've never had to do this before. Like, think about this for a second. And think about this maybe in a real way, not in a way that this is pretend. Problem solving, when you're faced with a problem that you cannot solve, is a skill. We learn how to look at a problem that we're uncertain about and how to poke at it from different angles. But imagine that every problem you faced for the first 25 years of your life, you've never had to do any kind of deep problem solving because it's all been so simple for you. And now, as an adult, for the first time, you're presented with things and those 25 years where everyone else has been learning to solve these problems and you haven't. Doesn't this give you a massive disadvantage now? Because your peers have developed these skills over years, over decades, that you haven't. So this blessing that you had, you thought it was a blessing. You're on the upper end of the IQ spectrum. Like, how could it possibly be bad? Oh, it can be real bad, right? This is why sometimes we say it's like beautiful people syndrome. Is beautiful people like they live in a bubble? But the thing about beauty is that beauty fades over time. And so what about the people that are not beautiful? They don't necessarily get the chance to live in that bubble. What does that mean? They have to develop things like a personality, like being nice to people, being kind. And then what does that do for those people? It likely advantages them. And now when that beautiful person and the shine wears off, and now they're at the same place beauty-wise as the other person that wasn't so beautiful but had to develop all these skills, isn't it inverted now? And I got to tell you, my experience has been, it could be quite inverted. It can be very inverted simply based on the idea that people that are not given certain gifts, and keep in mind, intelligence, like height, like beauty, like all of this stuff, it's a gift. You had nothing to do with this. However smart you are with your neurons, you did not do that. Your parents did that. Your parents gave you the genes that then created this neurological makeup. And so it's time to get over yourself. Don't run around talking about your IQ, whether it's good or bad, because it's not helpful at all. It's like just rambling off that, hey, I'm 5'10". How tall are you? Hey, I'm an Aquarius. Okay, so I don't mean to pick on astrological signs. Maybe I probably just lost 500,000 subs. I take it back. All you astrological people, I love it. I'm a Capricorn Aquarius, or so I'm told. Keep doing your thing, okay? But so hopefully you can see now that it may appear as though this is a good thing to be on the upper end and it's a blessing. Almost all of these things that can be seen as blessings often can have a lot of negativity. There can be curses to them as well. This is the preamble that I want to talk about. And now I want to talk about actually dissecting this and looking at the lens of your intelligence related to you, you thinking about other people's intelligence, and then the two inverted cases where people are other people are looking at you, or other people are looking at other people's intelligence, and why, generally speaking, I think most of this is not helpful. Okay, so let's start with you on you. This is you have some sort of awareness of your intelligence, and you can spend time thinking about this positively or negatively. In both cases, I think for the most part, if you're thinking about this as an immutable characteristic, something you cannot change, that's what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about things like emotional intelligence where you realize, hey, I have really bad emotional intelligence. I want to grow, so I'm going to read a couple books. That's different. That's not the intelligence I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind that's immutable. It can't be changed. Social intelligence, emotional intelligence, things that are skills, by all means, let's go learn and make those things better. Now, in the case that it's immutable, like your height, thinking about how much smartness you lack is likely only going to hurt your self-esteem, and it's out of your control. There's like nothing you can do about it. So just come to terms with who you are and do the necessary work. Keep in mind that like I just described, more likely than not, you're going to develop skills that your counterparts that are born with a lot of neurons, more neurons or whatever than you, like more height than you or whatever, more beauty than you, that's actually going to work to their disadvantage. Is they're not necessarily going to have to develop these skills. And so this gives you more of an opportunity to grow in this way. And on top of that, like as we've discussed many times, what we should really be doing is comparing ourself with ourself. So when you're thinking about your own intelligence, it's usually you thinking about how much you are smarter than other people or how you are dumber than other people. And in either of those cases, it's not helpful, because if we view it from an immutable thing, it's like saying, oh, this person is taller than me. Oh, this person is shorter. And those, comparison is the thief of joy. It just is not helping. What does help, though, is focusing on things that you can change, which is your knowledge. Is that rather than focusing on these immutable things, focusing on the fact that, look, I solve problems at this speed, and so I'm going to need more time. You allocate more time. And truthfully, what I've seen personally is our ability to problem solve, our ability to think clearly, those things actually are skills, and I think they can be enhanced. And so the more that you train yourself to work through these problems, the faster you'll get at them, at working through them, and you'll likely increase like your ability to think creatively. So that's another byproduct. But sitting around praising yourself or cursing yourself on your own intelligence is likely not a good thing, because it's not something that you can change. So you're just sort of, praising yourself. Just think about it like you're criticizing yourself by being ugly or beautiful. And I'm not talking about the things that you can control, like your own physical health, right? Those are parameters that you can control, and I encourage all of you. Exercise is really good purely from the standpoint of improving longevity and just being healthy, right? Okay, so that's the you on you with the intelligence. Now, what about you on others? Okay, this is you not thinking about your own intelligence, thinking about other people's intelligence. Okay. Why is this not necessarily a good thing? How does it help? How does it help if you are thinking that someone else is smart and that you're not? Or that you're smart and they're not as smart as you? I find that in my own experience, this is not helpful at all. And again, I'm not talking about knowledge. I'm not talking about, oh, this person knows a lot of information And so I should go talk to them because I can learn things from them. Like, again, this is why college professors are college professors. Is it because they're intelligent? I don't know, maybe. But more to that, it's because they know stuff. It's their knowledge. They possess a large amount of knowledge in a specific field. And so they're qualified by the powers that be to teach that topic. It doesn't have that much to do with intelligence. It has a lot more to do with their knowledge. And knowledge is gained through effort, not intelligence. I mean, again, there is this baseline. Remember, this is why we drew the line in the sand and said if you're at this 100 IQ or above, it's almost all the same. Like, there have been people that I've worked with that are at the upper end of this IQ piece. And they've told me that they've struggled significantly in life because they haven't learned until a later stage in their life how to solve problems, or because they've gotten so used to everything being easy that they're just going to take the easy road and not work on things that will challenge them. They haven't like built up the calluses. They haven't built up the mental calluses that other people have that weren't gifted with the 200 IQ. So oftentimes, in a very strange way, the people that might be the most gifted to do incredible things end up not doing those incredible things. And it's not because they don't have the innate qualities, the immutable qualities. They do. Is that they lack the development of the skills that they would need that are mutable qualities, like perseverance, like work ethic. And generally speaking, when there's, I go back to this many times, and I have to talk about this here because it's related. Generally speaking, there's two ways that you fail. You fail through lack of competence, and you fail through lack of care. Competence and care. Now, when I talk about competence, I mean knowledge. I'm not talking about intellect. I mean that if you asked me to code this really advanced thing in JavaScript, I would fail. Not because I don't care, but because I lack the competency in JavaScript. Does that mean that I'm an idiot? I mean, sure, right? But that's not the driving issue here. The driving issue is that I lack knowledge. I lack competency in this specific area. Can I learn competency in this? Yes, you can. And that's what we do every day with this whole growth mindset is we are learning more every day. We are educating ourselves. We are becoming more competent every day. So you can overcome failures in competency through effort, through care. This is why, in my view, failures due to competency are almost always forgivable because it's just they just didn't know. You didn't know you're supposed to lock the front door, okay? So you tell them, lock the front door, and then they lock the front door, and now that failure due to lack of competency is solved. Notice that almost every human being that we think about in our heads can lock the front door. It's just a knowledge thing. It's not an intellect thing. Now, there are more advanced things like rocket science or being a theoretical physicist. I do agree that as you start to get into some of these harder things, the baseline of intelligence that you need to enter those fields might increase. Sure. Right? I think that that's possibly true, but I think it's largely over-dramatized and it's exaggerated in my view. And I don't know why we do this, right? Like, we know as a species, we do have a spectrum of like our ability to think. But what I found is that almost all human beings can develop the skill of language. They can speak. And almost all humans, even humans that lack sight and hearing, They have no vision or hearing. They can still learn to communicate. Helen Keller is an example of this, right? That's phenomenal. I like just thinking about this. It is mind-boggling to me. Why is this relevant to this whole discipline of getting harder and harder? Communication in the ability to speak and write and draw things visually. This is like one of the highest orders of intelligence. This is what separates the human race from almost all other species. My dog does not know how to write a sentence. He doesn't know words. He knows how to bark. That's it. And he's crazy smart. Like he knows different tones of his one. He's probably saying more than one bark word. I probably just haven't figured it out. But like, it sounds very much the same to me. The point of this is that if those humans can learn those communication skills, which almost all humans can, and we've shown this over the advancement of our species, the ability to become literate, then why not literate in other things like programming languages? Programming languages, in my view, it's basically just an extension of communication, from communicating from one human to another human to communicate from one human to a machine. It's like basically that's it. That's like sort of, I mean, yes, there's more. It's nuanced, and it's going to be computers communicating to computers soon. It's already happening, right? But it's basically just communication. That's what code is. We're communicating intention to something else. And so if you can learn communication for interhuman dialogue, and that's supposedly one of the hardest things in the world to do, then couldn't you also learn that skill for communicating with machines? And notice now that I've gone from this base level of intelligence that almost all humans can do to now one of the highest, most cognitively challenging positions that exist in the world, which is software engineer. From here to here. And I believe that, like, in my experience, there hasn't been a single person that I've sat down with that can communicate clearly that I can't teach them how to code. Going back to the point about how intellect, raw intellect by itself, is not really that relevant. If Taylor Dozel solves a problem in 5 seconds that takes me 10 seconds, does that mean that I'll only ever be half of what Taylor Dolezal is? Or does that just mean that I just have to work harder? What about Taylor? Maybe he's so gifted with his IQ now that he starts becoming lazy and he rests on his laurels, and those other skills that I know I have to develop, he doesn't develop. And so it actually works against him. This is very much how intellect actually works in the real world. If you become obsessed with this, either because you're so amazing or because other people are so amazing, I can almost guarantee you're focusing on the wrong thing. You should be focusing far more on mutable characteristics, on skills that are learned, and praising yourself or other people for those things, not for immutable characteristics. How beautiful some supermodel is does not really matter to me. But what does matter to me is how hard someone works, because that's a demonstration of that person. So hopefully now we can see that when you think about intellect purely based on you judging yourself, either positively or negatively, it's not actually all that helpful, because there's not really anything you can do. If it's again, it's this whole waking up in the morning and praising yourself because you're taller than 6 foot, or or cursing yourself because you're shorter than 6 foot. Would you do that? I wouldn't. So don't. This is a waste of time. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so, yes, the competency and the care, the knowledge versus the effort, is knowledge is something that you can gain through effort. But if you don't have effort, If you fail through lack of effort, this is a much bigger problem, because this means that you will continue to fail constantly through lack of effort. And this is a problem for me. Like, I don't mind if people fail through lack of competency. They don't know things. There's many things that I don't know. But when I fail or people fail because they didn't try hard enough, I have major issues with this. Because that just means like they just don't care. Like, that's the whole thing about the care and the effort. Like, if you're so smart and you know the right thing, but you didn't do it, why didn't you do it? And then if you didn't do it now, what's going to stop you from not doing it next time? Or not doing all the other things that you know you're supposed to do when it comes the time to do those things. So anyway, the you on you with your intelligence is not super great. It's mostly just, I think, a waste of time. And if we think about intelligence as being immutable, there's nothing you can do anyway. So again, praising yourself or not praising yourself for this is silly. And in fact, as I think I've mentioned a few times, the first lecture that I give at the university that I teach at, I tell everyone that intelligence is a gift. It's not a skill. And stop praising yourself for being so smart, because you did nothing to deserve this. You just happened to win the lottery and be a smart person. So congratulations. Now get over yourself, because now we're going to actually have to demonstrate that you can work hard, because ultimately your ability to succeed in life is largely predicated, in my view, on your ability to work hard. That's a big part of it. I mean, yes, there's a huge amount of luck. Yes, these other factors can play in. And yes, there are some immutable things. Like if you happen to be born on the upper end of this IQ thing, maybe life is going to be easier for you. I wouldn't necessarily think that that's the case. You know, be careful about projecting or making assumptions about things. That if you talk to any of these like super beautiful women, many of them have told me that they think about it as a curse, because they're constantly getting hit on and they just want to be out in public and just kind of be invisible and just enjoy an experience without guys constantly pestering them. I can understand that probably is pretty annoying, right? So it's not all puppy dogs and rainbows. It's important that we understand this. So that's you on you for your intelligence. Now, you on others. Okay. I'm all for respecting people's accomplishments, but again, respecting it's like if I were to sit around and praise Taylor, I'm going to pick on Taylor because he's in the chat, about how amazing he is because of how tall he is, or because he has blonde hair. Like, Taylor, you're so amazing. You have this amazing blonde hair. What does that mean? Like, why would I do this? This is such a strange thing. So why do we do this with intelligence? Taylor, you're so amazing because you're so brilliant. It's the same thing. Taylor, you're so amazing because you have blonde hair. It's the same thing, guys. They're interchangeable. They're immutable characteristics. We shouldn't be praising or cursing anyone because of their immutable characteristics. Like, would you degrade someone because they're short? Like, oh, well, I'm sorry, you're 4 foot. You're never going to amount to anything meaningful. Sorry. We would never do that, because that doesn't actually relate to anything in real life. Similarly, just because someone doesn't have 160 IQ doesn't mean that they aren't going to accomplish amazing things through perseverance. So when you're thinking about other people, and this is largely for those of you who are leaders, my strong recommendation, and this is something I had to learn the hard way, don't ever praise people, especially in public, for being intelligent. Praise them for their effort. Praise them for their accomplishments, the things that they have actually done. And this is not just so you get away from being superficial. It has deep psychological ramifications. Let me try to explain. You can read up about this in Yes, right. Praising people for immutable characteristics is just so strange. Like it's very awkward and bizarre. So, but let's go down this path of you praise people for their intelligence. There have been studies that have shown that when children get praised for their intelligence, what it does is it inhibits their ability to take risks. Okay, this is one of those degrees of separation, but you'll get there pretty fast. If you haven't watched the degrees of separation video, I strongly recommend you check it out because it could potentially change your life in the way that you can think about problems. Most people think about problems in terms of one level and maybe one level of indirection. They start here and they just think about this thing. But I think people that are far more seasoned problem solvers, they can think in multiple degrees of separation. They can think about this point, this outer layer, this next layer, this next layer. This the same thing about the negative psychological effects it can have when you praise children for their intelligence. Let me explain. If you have a child and you are constantly praising them because of how smart they are, what you're doing is you're essentially telling them that we're praising you because you are right. You're correct. That's essentially what you're doing. Because if they're so smart, they figured something out, right? Let's just be honest. They figured out what the tip should be for the restaurant. They figured out their math problem. They figured out the capital of Florida, whatever. They figured something out. So they're right. You're praising them for being right. When you teach children that the only time they get rewards is when they're correct, what's the natural byproduct? The natural byproduct is that the children will then only exert themselves or speak up when they know they will be right. Therefore, if they're uncertain and they're going to have to take a risk and put themselves out there, there's no reward for risk-taking. There's no reward for effort. There's no reward for creativity. There's just reward in them being right for their huge brain because you taught them that. You taught them that they should only be praised when they get things right. There's no praise for getting things wrong. So then what does this do with risk-taking? Children learn very quickly that you shouldn't take risks because you're not going to get rewards. You're going to get a negative reward. And so don't take risks. Only do what is safe. And then the byproduct, highly intelligent children that could have achieved so much are now bound into this little box that we created because we rewarded them for the wrong thing. We just needed to reward them for their effort. Great job, Cindy, on the effort you put in to work on this problem. Even though you didn't get the right answer, it's the effort that matters. And then what happens is years and decades of this being reinforced psychologically is you're teaching that child how to take risks. You're teaching them to creatively problem solve. You're teaching them to focus on the work and the effort, not the outcome. And this is huge. This is like one of, I think in my life, this is one of the most important things you can do is be journey driven, not be outcome driven. Do not be outcome driven. Be directionally focused. So you can be directionally driven, meaning like I'm going this way. I don't know what this way will lead to, but I'm going to head this direction. And this is generally the right way that I want to go. I know I need to head north. And I may hit some mountains. I may get, slightly off target, but I'm heading in this direction. And that part you've got down. Don't necessarily focus on, I need to get exactly to Portland, Oregon. Because what if you're off by 2 miles? Are you a total failure? Like, I don't think so. I think all you need to do is just shift 2 miles to the left or to the right. And if you've traveled 1,000 miles and all you care about is like this specific outcome, and it's like you wanted to get an A+ in this class, and guess what? You just got an A. But you learned a huge amount. Like what's more important, the letter grade or the fact that you learned things? Literally, I asked this question my first day at the university, all because the university that I teach in, they tend to be very grades driven. And I'll tell them that if you work really hard, you'll probably get a good grade, but there's something that's more important than getting a good grade. And I'll ask them, what could possibly be more important than getting a good grade? Literally, I will ask this question. This is a graduate level computer science class at one of the best universities on the planet. I'll ask this question to like 50 to 60 master's and PhD students. Most of the time, people really struggle. And there'll be one student that will raise their hand and say, learning? Yes, learning. Learning is far more important than the letter grade. Like the letter grade is just like, but this is what can happen when you reward people just for their intelligence, is that they are like, okay, I don't care about anything else. All that matters is that I maintain a 4.0 GPA. My high school graduating GPA was a 2.7, solid C student here. Even for undergrad, my undergrad GPA was a 3.1. That's like solid B student. It wasn't until grad school that my grades started getting better. And the reason why they started getting better is I actually had to really try. And I was actually far more engaged. Part of the reason why my grades were so bad before is, I'll be honest, I just didn't care. I was kind of bored and I wasn't really trying. I could have done better and I probably should have. Like I'm not saying do bad in school. Like that's not the message at all. It's just that the lower echelons of school were just not super entertaining to me, and I found other things to do in school. I'm not trying to praise this behavior. I'm just trying to be honest. And it wasn't until grad school that I had to actually be like, okay, this is getting really hard now. I have to really try. And then coincidentally, my grades went up. But what's interesting is that my parents, specifically my mom, always praised me for thinking, for trying, for doing, even if I failed. She would make a joke about how the football team I was on in high school had a perfect record. We lost every game. And I think that that's true. We did. And she didn't care. Like, she just loved that I showed up. And I learned that like life isn't all just about the W's. And in fact, more importantly, many of the things in life are about the L's. The things that you can learn when you're getting those losses. Like, hopefully, my hope is that some of you that are listening to this were raised in sort of the bizarro universe that I think a lot of us were raised in, like myself, where you're being praised for intelligence and you're not being praised for effort. And so hopefully this is changing you in some way. You're learning and you're agreeing that, or maybe you're disagreeing, and that's fine too. But my hope is this will resonate with you minimally to stop focusing on your intelligence, which is an immutable quality, and also others' intelligence, which is immutable for them. It's great to praise them for their knowledge, but doing so as a reward mechanism, especially if you're a leader. If you're a leader, either in your family or on your team, and you praise people for their intelligence, you're likely doing them a disservice. Don't take my word for it. Read up on this. If you disagree with me, read up on it and see what you find. There's some really interesting studies that show that you generally should reward people for effort, not intelligence. So this is you thinking about others with their intelligence and how doing this oftentimes is a disservice, not only to you, but to other people. You're doing a disservice to them. And this is the craziest part, is most people in today's society, we somehow haven't come to this conclusion. I don't know why we haven't. It's very strange. In fact, I heard a commencement speech from Jeff Bezos, the former CEO and the founder of Amazon. And he talks about this in great detail. He talks about how you should be grateful for your gifts, but be proud of your accomplishments. And what he'll say is the gifts are things like how tall you are, how beautiful you are, how smart you are. His words. He will focus on these three things. Just like I may have stolen this from Bezos, but I've seen many people that are far smarter than me. Again, because I don't care about the whole. I'm not praising them for smartness. Maybe I'm actually being victim to my own thing. People that, how about this? People that know significantly more than I know have taught me this. And Bezos is one of those people. And I love this because I wouldn't praise Taylor because of his, man, you did a great job at Murley today because of your blonde hair. You know, thank goodness that we've got your blonde hair to do this. That would be really strange. So we should stop doing it for intelligence because we're being a bit superficial, and we're also focusing on the wrong things. This also goes, speaking of degrees of separation, this also lends itself to the eyes of the other people that are around when we're giving the praise to the individual. So if we are praising this person, Taylor, you are so smart, what do the other people in the room think? Oh, I'm never going to be as smart as Taylor. I don't have the IQ Taylor has. I guess I'm done here. I guess I have no, I got to find some place else to work because I can't compete with him. And that's right. Is that when you praise people on something that is immutable, what are they supposed to do? There's nothing other people can do to make themselves have more IQ. But if you praise Taylor for his effort and other people see, wow, Taylor's getting praised for working really hard. If I worked really hard, I could also get that praise. I could also have the same level of accomplishments that Taylor is having. And you can. And so what happens is you create the right motivation system for other people by focusing on mutable things, which is the effort that people can put in, the knowledge that people possess, the willingness for people to take risks and do things that maybe they're uncomfortable with that are like helping others. So this is why I think generally you should not focus on intelligence when you're talking or thinking about other people. You should focus on these other things that are mutable qualities. And likewise, I think these other two categories basically fall in the same vein. It's just in reverse. So this is where I think this third one, I think, is where you can come in and help change the narrative. Is if other people praise you for your intelligence, you could do them a service and correct them. You can, yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that can't see the chat, sorry, I've been talking quite a bit today. I was actually on nearly a 4-hour debrief with Taylor earlier, and now we're doing this for the second time. So I may have to cut this short just so I can get my voice back. But Taylor saying the accolades for effort feel so much better in my mind. That's what he's saying. I absolutely agree. Like, for example, I generally don't sit around and talk about the fact that I have a PhD because I just like, I'm not trying to be an elitist and hold that over people's heads. And like, I did it and I'm on to other things. Like, it's in the past. I don't focus on the past. I focus on the present, and I'm building for the future. I'm learning from the past, but I don't need to like be Dr. Goju. That's uninteresting to me. So generally, I don't mention this, but I do have a PhD, and I will tell you that when I was getting my PhD, it felt really good because I had done that. I had put in, I counted the years that it took, all the years from kindergarten up until PhD. It was 25 years of education if I did the math right. Did I do the math right? Yeah, let's just walk through it real quick. So K through 12, let's say that's 13 years. Then undergrad, let's say that's another 4 years. So that's 17 years. and then another 7. Okay, sorry, 24. It's 24 years because it was another 7 years for my master's and doctorate. 3.5, 3.5, total of 7. So 24 years. I apologize. Maybe I was doing kindergarten. No, that was included. Preschool. Who knows? Okay. But for 24 years, I was studying and I was learning. And so it felt like something I did because it was my effort. Now, interestingly enough, I think of myself as a lifelong learner, that I just am going to continue to learn no matter what. And so I look at it now and think, it's cool that I was studying for 24 years to pull this off, but now I'm 50 and I'm wondering to myself why I haven't been growing and learning for all 50 years. Like it's kind of typical Goju reverse take. But going back to this point about the accolades for effort, is that's an accolade for effort. I've also run a few races, and just accomplishing those, like I don't generally even care what my time is because I'm a terrible runner. I'm like super slow, but I've finished every race that I've signed up for, even though I've come in dead last in at least one of them, like literally dead last. I was the last person to cross the finish line. They were taking the finish sign down as I was crossing the finish line. That's what I mean by dead last. And I love it because I finished it. I did it. And that's what matters to me. I don't really care. Like in my mind, that's one more race that I finished that I hadn't finished the day before. I'm growing. And the truth is, that was actually my first marathon. So I had gone from running 0 marathons to running 1 marathon. I'll take it. Even if it's last place, I don't care, right? It seems like a victory to me. I'll take last place as a victory over no place as a loss any day of the week. And that's part of what it means to put yourself out there. Again, focusing on things that you can impact and affect, which is your effort, and not worrying about the things that you can't, which is like how tall you are or the color of your hair. So finishing up this thought on this third piece is when others are praising you for your intellect, you can jump in and help them. Because usually if they're doing it, they're saying about how smart you are. Oh, you're so smart. You can say, well, listen, I realize that's praise, but I tend to not focus on the immutable part. And you can do it in a graceful way. And more likely than not, you can help that person learn that they're focusing on praising you for immutable qualities. And you can explain to them kind of what I'm doing, and we can level up all boats, right? We're a rising tide. As a community, we're helping. And why are we doing this? Because it is sort of, in some ways, nonsensical to praise people for immutable qualities, things that they didn't do anything for. It's like it's promoting the lottery numbers that they picked rather than the marathon that they just ran. Like one is just total accident and happenstance. The other is disciplined effort over a prolonged period of time. I'm definitely supporting that second group and not that first group. And then lastly, others on others. What I mean here is that other people are talking about other people's intelligence, either for or against. And generally speaking, what I try to do is I try to shift the narrative for these discussions. I try to make the narrative more about their knowledge or their accomplishments and not about their intelligence. So for example, if people are talking to me about professors that I know, like I happen to be connected with a number of like really accomplished professors, and people start talking about how brilliant they are, I will remind them about how hard they work. I will say, oh, for sure, Armando Solar Lazama, his IQ is off the charts. I'll usually start this way, mostly just to reinforce that I agree with you. He does have this incredible immutable characteristic, but I know Armando well enough to know that he would probably want to be praised not for his immutable characteristics, but for his mutable ones. his story on how he came to the United States from Mexico, I believe, when he was like a teenager, and he barely spoke the language, and he eventually climbed and clawed his way into an undergraduate program. I think maybe UT Austin, because he was in Texas, and then fell in love with programming, and then somehow ended up at Berkeley and started studying under Roz Bodick, who's another super accomplished person in program synthesis. And then he'll say in his own words, by some miracle, he ended up landing a job as a professor at MIT, and then the lid just got blew off from that. This is his way of telling the story. He's told me the story many times, and the focus is not on his 190 IQ. His focus is on him overcoming challenges and adapting to things in a foreign space, in this case, like truly a foreign country, and learning how to adapt and the different obstacles that he ran into as a person that are likely unique to his situation. And I think that's incredible. So when you're involved in these conversations with others, what I tend to do, if the focus is too much on these innate skills, these innate qualities, I try to shift it to things related to effort. Now, I want to share that I have had conversations with some people where they're unyielding. They refuse to believe that these things are the accomplishments are learned. That you're either born with this Mozart level skill or you're not. And for those people that can't be compelled, I personally, they tend to not last very long in my inner circle because I deeply care about these things. And I don't like to have this idea of resigning myself to failure before I've even started. I think that that's not helpful. Like, even if that's true, which I don't think it is, I think that's not a really good way to live. So at this point, I need to abruptly end this stream, mostly because I need to take a bio break. But I want to thank all of you for joining. This has been super awesome. Please leave more comments in the comment section. Give me more ideas. And whatever you do, if you've taken one thing away from this episode, it's let's not focus so much on immutable characteristics like intelligence, and let's instead focus on the mutable ones like effort. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.